Do you want high serum testosterone levels, or do you want to be the man who was built on high testosterone levels? Testosterone does not make you into a masculine man by default. It facilitates you becoming that man, but it's not going to do that work for you. Repairing the foundation does not rebuild the house. It gives you the opportunity to do so, but it doesn't do that for you. You and I, and everyone who's alive today, is the dominant bloodline of the human race. You are the descendants of those who overcame every single adversity since the dawn of mankind. You have so much fucking potential, and you should live up to that potential. Okay, everyone, I hope you are all well. Welcome to another one of my revision lectures. This was previously called Your Brain on Testosterone and the War on Masculinity, Part 2. This was originally presented at the online virtual version of the Silverback Summit, and I wanted to come and revisit this because this was originally filmed early in 2023, so it's about 2.5 years since this was originally recorded. And over the last 2.5 years, I've had the pleasure of working with thousands more TRT clients than I had at this stage, thanks to the partnerships with my clinics all over the world. And this is such an important topic to visit and revisit because I would say, and maybe I'm a little bit biased, that this lecture has aged very well. These topics and these issues are something that I consistently talk to my clients about to date. And one of the things that comes up a lot on TRT that I speak about, and you may have read this in my books or seen this in my other podcasts or lectures or somewhere else, but one of the key things that causes the side effects on TRT that a lot of men are watching videos like this or other videos on YouTube to try to understand and resolve comes down to lifestyle issues, comes down to psychological issues, and a lot of these things are actually maladaptive coping mechanisms from being in a hypogonadal state long term. Now, the other part of this that I think is very much worth covering on is that when we're looking at these habits and these lifestyle issues or lifestyle optimizations, on different ends of the spectrum, one thing that I say a lot, and this is kind of the central theme of this lecture, is to stop doing all the things you know you shouldn't be doing and start doing all the things you know that you should be doing. And one of the things that I have come to learn, and this is not a negative reflection on anyone whatsoever, but it is understanding that a lot of people don't know what these things are. And this doesn't mean that the individual is stupid. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with them for not knowing these things. But if this is someone's first, foray into their health or wanting to improve their state of well-being, it can be confusing and overwhelming, especially now in 2025, when there is so much information online about if someone is wanting to improve these things, what are the things that they should be executing. So the idea of this talk originally was to give people an actionable, pragmatic guide to what these things are that they can improve on, or what these things are that they can remove from their lives, which may be either contributing to poor symptom resolution, side effects on TRT, or even just an overall poor quality of life, which a lot of the time people are looking to use testosterone to compensate for or offset. And one of the things that I've learned about working with men, and it may be true for working with women as well, I don't know, but it's definitely true for working with men, is that if someone intrinsically understands a point, rather than simply just being told what to do, their chance of compliance with that is much higher because they feel like they are making a decision themselves. And I'm very big on providing information for people in a way that they can understand, that they can apply to their day-to-day life without putting a paywall in front of it, because this is all the stuff that makes a huge, huge difference when working with men on TRT once their protocol is actually optimized in the first place. So If you are not familiar with the basics of optimizing TRT protocols, please watch my TRT masterclass. It is free on YouTube. It is very in-depth. It is very understandable. It lays everything out for you. And if you would like a shorter, more condensed version that you can refer back to, maybe you can control F the key points, you can pick up my TRT 101 ebook from my website if you would like as well. So I have not looked at this since end of 2020, start of 2023 when this was originally recorded. And I'm just going to give one more quick shout out for my friend Ali Gilbert, who puts on the Silverback Summit every year. It was amazing for her to give me this opportunity to basically speak about whatever I wanted. And if you are watching this before the Silverback Summit in November in 2025, you can check out our link for the tickets below. Otherwise, if you're watching this in the future, hello from the past, please check out what she is doing with the Silverback Summit, because I am confident that every year it is going to get bigger and better. And she has been an amazing friend to me over the recent years, as well as a pivotal person in giving me the opportunities to grow my career, as well as give you guys this information. So a big thank you to Ali. So the first point that I want to look at here is, where do you even start with this? So there's a couple of questions that I want you to ask yourself, and I want you to actively reflect on while you're listening to this. So number one, have you had high testosterone before? Or are you giving yourself optimal testosterone levels for the first time? This is a really important point that I don't think gets discussed much, if at all. So what you need to consider is, how long were you hypogonadal before starting TRT, and how many of your values, your attitudes, and your habits, and how much of your identity have been built around a low testosterone state? There is a stark difference in the initiation phase of testosterone replacement therapy, most notably the first 3 to 6 months, but I would even say the first year, where if you're comparing two men, one is a guy, let's say in his 40s, early 50s maybe, who has the early stages of what's called age-related hormone decline via primary hypogonadism. So this means that when he goes on TRT, he's taking his testosterone levels back to somewhere that his body has been before. He's going back to feeling more like how he felt when he was in his prime, in his maybe early 20s or late 20s. The difference, though, is that if you're taking a younger guy who maybe never had peak testosterone levels to begin with, and you're giving him these testosterone levels for the first time. So I kind of refer to this as, in a lighthearted or comedic way, as like puberty 2.0. But it's also very important to understand that this is not just a big physiological change, because the body now has to adapt new enzymatic processes. It has to learn how to balance fluids properly. It has to learn how to do a whole bunch of things that it's never done before, because those levels didn't properly develop. But this individual, when he was becoming a man and becoming an adult, going through formative years, didn't have this optimal androgenic surge. And if you haven't seen the first video in this series, I go through why that is so important in terms of developing character attributes and experiences that ultimately lead to someone being further along in their development by the time they get to, let's say, late 20s or early 30s. So if you have developed a lot of your mental health processes, your thoughts, your values, your dispositions, as well as your self-esteem and your identity around someone who is hypogonadal, someone who is fearful, someone who is not competent and not confident as a result, then you need to understand that this is going to be a much longer process in terms of getting you from A to B and fulfilling your expectations, because you need to basically go through a metamorphosis. You need to go through activities and practices and habits consistently over time so that you can ultimately become the person that you want to be. And this is something that takes time, and this is something that takes work. I think in the former, we often talk about this idea that testosterone takes time to work, and it absolutely does. But in the latter, it kind of goes twofold, because now we're looking at a scenario where you also need time to do the work. And I'm going to specifically talk about what that work is in today's lecture, because I think it often gets glossed over as like an ambiguous, esoteric kind of thing without actionable points. So the second point is, how are your diet and lifestyle habits? And how long have they been this way? So do you have to learn and implement the correct diet and lifestyle practices, or are you already practicing these? How good is your current baseline state of health outside of hypogonadism? And this is another very important point. If you have been eating like garbage and you have not been exercising and you have been drinking a bunch of alcohol, and you are the outcome of the person who's been doing that habitually for a while, if you change your diet and lifestyle habits tomorrow to be picture perfect, you're going to feel much better straight away, but you are going to feel much better over time when you are the person who's been doing those things right long term. The challenge is that often discipline and understanding what these things are and undoing these maladaptive habits that people often become conditioned to do because they feel like crap. So they do stuff that's even more crap for them in the long term, but it might make them feel a bit better in the short term because they're like, well, fuck it, I'm going to feel like crap anyway. This is part of being a human. A lot of the time we make bad long-term decisions to make ourselves feel better in the short term. This is just part of being a human. So the other scenario is when guys are hypogonadal, but they have consistently, and again, please pardon my French, I'm going to try to not be as vulgar for the rest of the lecture, but if they're used to pushing shit uphill and they are used to going against the challenges of being hypogonadal, so let's say even though they're not getting results, they're still hitting the gym, they're still eating well, they're trying to do everything they can just to feel okay. Well, when you put testosterone in optimal levels in someone like that, it's kind of like taking a sports car engine and then putting it into a sports car. It works very well because that physiological environment is adapted and is ready to ultimately receive these testosterone levels because you're putting the testosterone levels into that body that should have been there all along. The problem is if someone is practicing a bunch of poor diet and lifestyle habits, if you put the optimal healthy levels of testosterone into that guy, even though he should have those levels as a man, he is in a current state in which his body would likely be suppressing that production. So you're basically taking that sports car engine and you're putting it into an old Suzuki Swift that needs a service. And the problem is that the hormone is not going to metabolize properly. It is not going to have the right receptor availability because there's now a disconnect. And I think it's very important. And again, if you watch my TRT masterclass, you will see how I talk about protocols and considerations that should be made for men who are less healthy when they start TRT, because they're making a choice to use testosterone to help them get from A to B because they have had an informed conversation, I would hope, with their practitioner where they understand that these maladaptive processes, even in fixing them, likely wouldn't resolve their hypogonadism. And this can be determined by LH and FSH suppression, which you can see in the TRT masterclass. The next point, do you have any comorbid medical conditions which are untreated or undiagnosed? And the analogy that I use here is that where there is smoke, there's fire. So have you actually been assessed properly? And one of the sad things since recording this lecture originally is that as TRT has become much more popular and much more widespread, more clinics have jumped on the bandwagon in capitalizing on the demand, but they don't know what the hell they're doing with actually treating and diagnosing men properly. So a lot of the time, they'll just test testosterone levels. They'll be like, yep, you're low. Here's your testosterone. See you later. But because they're not actually getting a proper comprehensive assessment from an expert, they may be missing things such as insulin resistance, fatty liver disease, hypothyroidism, a bunch of other hormone deficiencies such as pregnenolone, DHEA. And these things, when you put testosterone in there, will now have this light shone on them because now you are stressing a system that previously was problematic but wasn't under a whole bunch of stress because the rest of the body's systems were also repressed and unhealthy. So again, if we go back to the sports car engine analogy, if you have a car that needs a service and instead of fixing it, you put a sports car engine in there, you may now find that this sports car engine, because you speed out of the parking lot, will now put a bunch of pressure on these other parts of the car which needed to be fixed in the first place. And this often comes up with sexual dysfunction, water retention, high blood pressure, poor sleep. These factors can come up even when the TRT protocol is dialed in. And when the practitioner who is incompetent is looking at the testosterone levels, they're going, oh, well, it's fine. It's all in your head. But if someone is not actually getting a proper comprehensive assessment from an expert, then you're going to be in trouble. So the next point, how is your baseline psychological state? And I put in capital letters here, honestly. So are you holding it together or are you off track? And the last question, which is very important to ask yourself, and if you're not going to ask yourself this, you are setting yourself up for disappointment. You are setting yourself up for problems. You are setting yourself up to not have your expectations met, is, are you ready to do the work? One of the biggest misconceptions that people have, especially young men, is having this idea, which is wrong, which is that if you are exogenously administering your testosterone, meaning that you're putting it in from an external factor, you're saying, well, now that I've got optimal testosterone levels, I don't need to do all the lifestyle stuff that would usually be required in order to have optimal androgen levels. So I can, eat poorly and have more cheat meals and train less and have some more drinks on the weekend because I've got these optimal testosterone levels already. Wrong. I mean, yeah, you do, but this is what's going to cause side effects because you, in your infinite knowledge, are actually creating a huge disconnect between the levels that you're administering and the levels that your body should have. Therefore, the enzymatic pool that your body is producing is not primed to actually receive and metabolize this testosterone, and therefore you're going to have a completely dysregulated endocrine environment because you are pumping a bunch of testosterone that would never be present, it would usually be suppressed, into an inflamed environment. And this causes excess aromatization. The solution for this is not to just take an estrogen blocker that is even more stupid and tends to solve one problem and create 5 more. So the first thing that's very important to look at here is setting expectations. So the gap between expectations and reality of TRT vary drastically from person to person. Some people have very realistic expectations for this. Some people think it's going to turn them into some porn star crossed with Superman, crossed with The Rock, crossed with, God knows whatever else. And in reality, TRT is just giving you the correct optimal levels of testosterone that you should have. So it is going to give you the results from the work that you do, no more, no less. And I think a lot of the time people are expecting a lot more. This is not going to make you feel like you are constantly on nootropics or constantly have a super high sex drive all the time. You are going to feel how a normal man should feel with healthy androgen levels. So the distance between the expectations and the reality can lead to men often becoming despondent or disheartened. And the results can actually end up with them channeling their efforts into the wrong areas. So what happens is a guy will start TRT, he might feel a little bit better, but because his diet and lifestyle practices are off, he will make the assumption, and I understand how people come to this conclusion because from a layman's perspective, it does kind of make sense. You're saying, well, I felt crap and I took some testosterone and now I feel okay. So that means if I take more testosterone, it's going to make me feel better. This is pattern recognition. This makes sense. But in reality, it doesn't work like this. Now, sometimes people do need more testosterone. Absolutely. A lot of the time, the doses people are given are too low, especially when practitioners don't understand that the reference range and the physiological range are not the same thing. But I have seen a lot of men over the recent years who will spend hundreds or thousands of dollars a month on supplements. They will add anabolic steroids into their TRT protocol because they're not gaining muscle fast enough based on their expectations. And as a result, they end up putting a bunch of work and stress and research and energy into trying to solve a problem, but it's not because of a lack of effort that they don't resolve these things. It's because they're putting their effort into the wrong areas. And a lot of the time, the wrong areas are things that people are just using to drive attention and clicks or sell stuff with affiliate codes, rather than helping people understand that these things that they need to do are often based on habits and are almost all free. Not that groceries are free and healthy food is free and so on and so forth, but I think you get what I'm trying to say. So, as I said before, it's logical to assume that if some testosterone took you from bad to okay, that more testosterone should take you from okay to good. But it doesn't work like that. So, testosterone takes a long time to turn you into the man that you want to be. And again, in the first part of this lecture series, I talked about how a lot of the time men are hoping to become more masculine versions of themselves. And for some reason, masculinity now has stigma attached to it, which is absolutely absurd. But a lot of the time, men are wanting to become more stoic, more grounded, have more of a capacity for leadership, have a better relationship with the voice in their head, and have better habits and values and inclinations towards doing the right things, whether it's being disciplined or training more regularly or being more calm in arguments or being more confident when they speak to people. And all of these things are really good goals to have. But what people must understand, and this is something that I wish it wasn't this way, my job would be a lot easier, but it just is that when you start TRT, there is absolutely, for a lot of people, an acute effect. When you spike your androgens up for the first time, there can often, not all the time, but a lot of the time be a honeymoon period. And when this honeymoon period subsides after 2 weeks or 2 months, guys will say, oh, well, it stopped working. It didn't stop working. The main benefits that we get from TRT are actually due to long-term effects from what's called DNA transcription at the androgen receptor, meaning that it is the chronic activation of the androgen receptor sufficiently that creates change in the body over time. So let's say you bring your testosterone levels up to optimal, and whatever optimal is for you, again, watch the TRT masterclass, but let's say, somewhere beyond the top of the reference range for argument's sake. If you achieve that level at 12 weeks versus 12 months or 2 years, you will have increased benefits over that trajectory of time for having optimal androgen levels for a prolonged period. But a lot of the time, people are not educated on this up front. So when they come back after 12 weeks or 6 months on treatment, they're saying, well, I feel better, but I don't feel how I think I should feel, which means that there's something wrong. Whereas in reality, if at 12 weeks or 6 months you have a 20% improvement, that's a positive. You need to give it time. And I know that people who feel crap want to feel better sooner. There is nothing wrong with that, but it takes time. It takes longer than most people are willing to accept. And that is the reality of how hormones work. It is why when a boy hits puberty, he doesn't instantly become a full-grown man overnight. It takes time for the body to change and respond to these optimal hormone values. It's not a glitch, it is a feature. So, testosterone, as I said before, does not allow you to get away with poor diet and lifestyle. In fact, it's the opposite. It actually means that you must live an optimal diet and lifestyle in order to tolerate optimal androgen levels and to get the benefits that you're hoping to achieve. As I said in the first lecture, if you haven't watched it, please watch it. Testosterone replacement therapy acts as a multiplier for all the positive diet and lifestyle habits that you follow. But if you multiply anything by 0, so if you take the benefits of testosterone and then multiply 0, you're going to have 0. So testosterone is a compounding multiplier. It is a force multiplier for these factors over time. But the gap between the lifestyle habits that you should have and the lifestyle habits that you currently have is the territory that causes side effects. And this is something that people on Reddit and people in Facebook groups do not seem to understand. And I understand that it is a challenge and it kind of goes against human nature because we always want to follow the path of least resistance. So we want a pill or we want a protocol that will fix these things. But in reality, if you know the stuff that you're doing that you shouldn't be doing, and you know the stuff that you should be doing that you're not doing, even if you don't understand the mechanism behind why those things are causing you problems, just fix that equation. That is the easiest, cheapest, most straightforward place to start. And I will be going through what those things are in this lecture so that you have a clear understanding of what the biggest factors are in practice. Because I have worked with a lot of men on the health coaching and lifestyle factors relating to why they are having side effects. So, and this is another very important point. So a lot of the time I talk about the importance of injection frequency and optimizing the dose. However, optimizing injection frequency or tweaking your dose won't fix diet and lifestyle problems. It may help diet and lifestyle problems while you are getting them on track. The more off track you are, the more frequently you must administer your testosterone. I would recommend everyone administers daily if you want the optimal testosterone pharmacokinetics of cypionate or enanthate. But if you are unhealthy, particularly if you are metabolically compromised, meaning that you are insulin resistant and overweight, it is even more important that you create stability in your androgen levels because this reduces the side effects significantly, but it will not solve it entirely. Now, this point can be difficult for people to understand, and I am not having a dig, but you can't dial in your TRT yourself from watching YouTube videos and asking questions in a Facebook group. You can become educated. This video is to help you become educated, to be able to understand the scenarios so that you can have an informed conversation with the expert that's looking after your treatment. But if you watch a YouTube video and you've never serviced a car in your life, just like 99.99999% of people on TRT have never done interventional endocrinology before, if you watch a YouTube video, you can't service your car effectively. You might be able to, but there's a much better chance you're going to mess it up even more. You can't perform surgery on yourself by watching a YouTube video showing someone how to do it. You can't. And there's a good chance you're going to create more problems than you're solving by either popping the bonnet or cutting yourself open. But people do not give the same amount of care and put the same amount of emphasis on the value of expert outsourced guidance when it comes to their own body that you only get one of. The hormone system is extremely interconnected with every single system in the body. It sits upstream, kind of like a puppet master or a marionette. So if you mess with your hormone system without knowing what you're doing, you're going to mess with all your different biological functions. And I do see that people are often more protective or more conscious of not messing up their car, but they're willing to mess up their endocrine system. So I understand that people are looking to solve problems. I understand that people in these groups and on YouTube are trying to help a lot of the time. They have good intentions. But if you are lost in the forest and you ask someone else who is also lost to give you directions and they point you in the wrong direction and you go that way, that can actually leave you worse off than if you hadn't followed their directions in the first place. So I've seen this play out badly a lot, so be careful. A big part of TRT is what you take. The dose and the frequency of your testosterone therapy is extremely important, and it is incredibly important. I've done multiple lectures, I've written multiple books on this, but the other half of this equation that people will often overlook, and they'll optimize the hell out of their protocol, but they will completely neglect the rest of it, is what you do and what you don't do for the rest of the 23 hours and 55 minutes in the day. So I was taught a saying when I was being mentored in counseling, which is that you have to meet the medicine halfway. And this is exactly how testosterone replacement therapy works to deliver the outcomes that people are hoping to achieve when they start the treatment. So this next point is how we fix this. So first thing, and I've said this, multiple times in these slides, is give it time, give it time, give it time, give it time, and then give it more time. So as I said, you can fix all these habits, you can fix all these processes, but you need to be the outcome of the person who has fixed these processes a while ago. So start today or start tomorrow. It is never too late to get on track, but understand that you need to stay on track and have been on track for a while. So work on practices that create challenge, practice discipline, and push you outside your comfort zone. And like I said in the first lecture, you want to progressively overload outside the gym with working on self-development and working on pushing outside your comfort zone. So if you go way too far outside your comfort zone, you're probably going to retreat right back into it because it was too overwhelming too quick. But if you can find ways to program in micro adversity into your life, to practice discipline just for the sake of practicing discipline, this can be really beneficial because it translates into other aspects of your life, especially if you can be the observer and objectively reflect on your circumstances to recognize that maybe a bunch of the situations that you're in outside of the TRT stuff is as a result of not being disciplined in key areas of your life. So, as I said, I haven't worked with women much. I've worked with men for 99% of my career. And I can tell you that men tend to respond well to experiential learning. So, one thing that I learned from Paul Chek was the importance of both working out and working in. So what he referred to as working in is processes and exercise-based modalities that give you more energy than you expend. So if you go to the gym and you squat and you deadlift and you bench press and you sprint, you have less energy than before you went. You work out. But if you go for a walk in the sun, if you do some gentle yoga, if you do some mobility work, if you do some maybe light calisthenics, you will have more energy than before you started, but you will have also gone through movement, full ranges of motion, exercise. This is a really important thing that a lot of people are not doing. They're training really hard. They're really, really stressed when they're working. They're watching action movies and playing video games, and they're never actually doing things that replete and rebuild their energy. So another point that I think is really overlooked is to look for a male mentor or a positive male role model. And some of us grew up with fantastic fathers who gave us, a North Star in terms of how we want to be as men, but a lot of us didn't. And it can be really powerful or equally powerful in terms of a motivating aspect to have a negative male role model. If you grew up with men in your life who embodied traits or they ended up in a certain way or they treated you in a certain way where you said, I never want to be like that, that could be very positive. But that can light the fire of doing this work, but it's very difficult to really understand what those processes and activities and habits are unless you have someone that you can look up to, who can show you the way, who can teach you these things so that you have someone to aspire to. And a lot of the time we can find these days positive male role models online. This is why a lot of podcasters are very popular. Authors are very popular. A lot of influencers are very popular who have a positive message, is because they can act as positive male role models. And I think a lot of men, particularly younger men, really need people to look up to maybe not copy or emulate exactly, but to have a group of men, maybe even online, that you want to be an amalgamation of all the positive things that these guys have going for them. But having someone in your life to do that with in person, if possible, can be really, really beneficial because you also have someone to hold you accountable. So nutrition is also extremely important. And I see a lot of people doing the if it fits your macros thing. Yeah, you can lose weight and get abs, controlling your proteins and carbs and fats from eating garbage. I don't recommend that you do it, but plenty of people have proven that you can. But if the quality of the nutrition going into your body is garbage, you might have abs, but you'll be covered in acne and feel like crap. All kinds of digestive issues as well. So people say, oh, only eat quality food. And then other people say, well, only count your calories. Do both. It may be difficult and it may be a lot of work, but you need to control your nutrition intake calorically for your body composition goals and your energy output. And it also needs to be from high quality good food. It's not a this or that, it's both. So if you're looking for a nutrition framework to follow, I strongly recommend checking out Mike Dolce's work. I think his work is phenomenal. I think if people are looking for a simple starting place to look at, I would strongly recommend checking out his framework. There are plenty of ways that you can eat. I think for people who are into the bodybuilding approach or people who have digestive issues, I think the vertical diet is a great framework. There are a lot of people with really good nutritional frameworks. My friend Dr. Adam Hotchkiss, if you go on his Instagram, has some phenomenal days of eating that he uploads. But if people are starting from a complete square one and are looking to have a framework of the basics of nutrition, I would strongly recommend checking out my friend Mike Dolce. The next point, which was a huge one for me after I started TRT and comes back to this male mentor and role model and experiential learning, this is like hitting 5 birds with one stone, is consider learning martial arts. Now, there's a few caveats here. So, number one, I do not recommend sparring and getting hit in the head. As someone who had a brain injury, as someone who has done a lot of work with brain injuries, head trauma is not beneficial. And good martial arts coaches will agree, unless you want to be a professional fighter, which if you've never done martial arts before and this is the first time you're hearing about that, it's probably not the career path. I wouldn't recommend it as a career path unless you really want to do it. Still probably wouldn't recommend it. But learning martial arts as a practice and a skill in a safe environment is a great way to simulate a very stressful, violent situation that you can adapt to and become conditioned to handling this level of stress. I actually just came from a coffee with my Muay Thai coach, and this is what we were talking about. So before I started TRT, I had no interest at all in doing anything related to martial arts. And when I got to a point in my life where I realized that I was becoming overwhelmed and getting paralysis by analysis of things that weren't objectively as stressful as I was subjectively experiencing them at, meaning that I was experiencing a disproportionate amount of stress relative to the things I was getting stressed out by. I realized that the problem wasn't that my life needed to become easier, I needed to become harder. And this is a really valuable use of time because if you take 1 hour a week, or ideally 1 hour twice a week, so that you can develop the skill more efficiently, to learn martial arts one-on-one with a coach doing pad work, there are so many benefits to this use of your time. You will have a male role model who is teaching you combat skills. You will have a cathartic, meaning a physical, emotional release of aggression, but you will also learn to become conditioned to handling a very stressful scenario in terms of the energy output and the violent situation of martial arts, and to keep your cool. And as a result, if you invest that 2 hours twice a week or 1 hour, once a week to experience this form of what I would call therapy, it means that by contrast, everything else will feel easier. So my challenge and my recommendation to people who are considering this is, I don't care what form of martial art you do. For the sake of the therapeutic conditioning of stress, I think all striking-based martial arts are equally beneficial. I like Muay Thai, but I recommend finding whichever form of martial art. I know boxing is not technically a martial art, but I'm going to put boxing into that category. Some people would say it is, some people would say it's not. I don't care. But some form of striking-based combat sport, do whichever one you want to do, or do whichever one you can find the best coach. And if you go and do that for 8 to 12 weeks, if you're the person who comes out the other side of that, you will have conditioned yourself and gone through a lot of experiences that you will derive a huge amount of value from. I think that is such an overlooked form of therapy in improving resilience. So when men are wanting to become more resilient, this is an actionable process that you can do. And hopefully, if you have a good experience doing it, you will come out the other side very grateful that you did. I joked today that the first session is not the hardest because you didn't really know what you were getting into. The second session and the third session, when you chose to go back and realized how difficult it was to have this level of physical output in a mentally stressful scenario, I think that shows a lot of courage. I think that shows a lot of bravery. I think that is someone taking control of the challenging circumstances in their life and choosing to do something that is uncomfortable and making a change. And I think that there is a huge amount of value in just the action of going, not including all the fantastic benefits of doing that. So I think that martial arts is very underrated as a form of psychological therapy, as well as a great way to have exercise and to become connected with a male positive role model and mentor. So another thing that I recommend people look at is consider setting a challenging fitness goal which you thought was just beyond your reach. And if you're not conditioned towards athletics, if you don't have a foundational strength aspect to your body, probably not going to recommend putting 4 plates on the squat bar or 4 plates on the deadlift bar. It's a great way to slip a disc. I would be recommending looking at a fitness performance output or a body fat percentage or some kind of quantifiable, actionable thing that you can work towards. Maybe it's a entry-level Spartan race, or maybe it's, I don't really recommend half marathons, but something in that realm of a fitness goal. Maybe it's rowing 5Ks on the ergo machine. There are things that you can work towards as a goal based on performance. And that way you're not just quantifying your progress as how you look in the mirror. You can actually have something that is an end goal that you are working towards, and ideally something that you never would have thought that you would be the kind of person who did. I'm going to put up on the screen my example of this was actually right after I had my brain injury, right after I started TRT. This was probably one of the best and worst days of my life, where I ran a Spartan race and I came dead last, but I was determined to go through the race I had been training for before my brain injury and see it through because I didn't want to be the person who gave up. And I carry that medal around my neck everywhere I go. If you watch the videos in my studio, you'll see it on the wall. That was a very challenging thing for me to do, but one of the most satisfying experiences I've had in my life to date, and I can remember it vividly, was laying down in bed after coming home from that, accomplished, completely physically worn out, but mentally so proud of myself that I'd done something that all the odds were stacked against me and that I never thought I'd be able to do, especially in the circumstances I was going through at the time. And you can see in the photo that I am not particularly well. So the other thing that I speak about a lot, and I'm going to re-record my lecture on this. It's covered in my TRT 102 ebook. I speak about it all the time in my TRT Academy. There's a link for that in the description. Consider a daily meditation practice. A lot of people still consider meditation to be like this woo-woo spiritual esoteric thing, and it can be, but there is a lot of interventional secular, meaning non-religious or non-spiritual based outcomes from practicing 10 minutes of mindful meditation each day. I like to look at mindful meditation as the yin and yang compared to martial arts. So if martial arts is the yang, meaning the fire of the yin and yang diagram, meditation is the yin. And martial arts is learning to maintain your stress control and your mental focus in a highly stressful environment, whereas mindfulness meditation is learning to focus and channel your attention with no stimulus at all. And the more stimulating technology becomes with mobile phones and social media and the TikTok crap that people watch and all these different things that are constantly driving your attention span down, learning to focus your attention with no stimulation in an environment that is uncomfortably boring is also very, very challenging. It's a lot like stretching, or it's a lot like yoga or cardio, where if you've never done it or you haven't done it in a long time and you really need to do it, it's gonna suck. And it's not gonna feel good until you get good at it. If you have no cardiovascular fitness and you get on the elliptical or you go for a run, it's gonna feel torturous. It's gonna feel horrific. If you stretch for the first time in your life, it is not going to feel good. But that is not a signal to say, oh, that means that stretching's not for me. No, it means that you need to do it more. And just like with cardio, if you get to the point that you can actually sustain cardiovascular output to the point that you get the endorphin high, the runner's high, then it starts to feel good. But it doesn't feel good until you get to the point where you've kind of developed that skill through regular practice. And mindful meditation is the same. I strongly recommend downloading the Headspace app and doing their basics program. I've been using Headspace since the iPhone 3G came out. I do not have an affiliate code for them. I'm probably not going to get an affiliate code because I don't want people to think that I am recommending something purely for 8% of the profits. But personally, for me, learning the practice of mindful meditation via Headspace and being consistent with it, my general rule for people to follow, if you want a framework, is you do it every day. And if something comes up and you don't do it, that's fine. Do it the next day. But if you skip 2 days in a row, go back to the start and start again and complete the basics program. Meditation is like going to the gym and developing, let's say, grip strength. And then being mindful day to day is the skill you get from the practice, kind of like carrying all the groceries in one trip, which we know is integral for all men to be able to do. That's just common sense. So learning to be mindful is very important because you are now regulating your emotions and controlling your impulses. You are able to be the observer of your own mind and do the things you need to do, not the things you want to do. The person who sets the alarm at 6 a.m. is a very different person than the person who gets woken up by the alarm going off at 6 a.m. And everyone has the impulse to stay in bed and hit snooze, but overriding that impulse and doing what you need to do and keeping your word to yourself is a mindfulness exercise. It is choosing to do what you need to do and to exert your willpower. And if that's something you struggle with, this is not something that you are broken in. This is not something that you have some kind of incurable deficit in. It means that you don't have a skill that you haven't learned and that you haven't practiced. And modern technology is constantly working against you in terms of having good impulse control and having the ability to focus your attention on things that are not hyper-stimulating. So I would strongly recommend, if people really want to go all in with this, is to do the martial arts 1 to 2 times a week with a coach that is not going to get you punched in the head, and doing a daily 10-minute mindfulness meditation practice. I can confidently say that 99% of people who would benefit from this will not do it. But the 1% who do will absolutely change their life as a result from it. I can promise you that because I have seen it a lot. So, another really simple thing, really simple, actionable thing that makes a big difference. And again, like I said before, I've worked with a lot of people on a lot of things, and I've spent a lot of time with people talking about this stuff. Consider just getting up an hour earlier each day to work on whatever your weaknesses are. So if you don't get enough steps, get up an hour earlier and go for an hour walk. If you are tight and in physical pain and sit at a desk all day and you have no mobility in your body, get up an hour early and do 2 to 3 10-minute follow along yoga or mobility practices on YouTube. There are some fantastic free ones out there that you can do. If you are extremely behind on your chores and to-do list and like life admin, you've got a bunch of emails to reply to, you've got a bunch of unpaid bills, and at the end of the day, you're like, I'm going to do it at the end of the day, and then you're tapped out of willpower and you just can't be bothered and you put it off to tomorrow, and now you're overwhelmingly stressed by a whole bunch of little things that you've just put off. get up an hour earlier, make a coffee, and start to chip away at that list. So whatever you find is a weakness, get up an hour earlier every day and work on that weakness. So I want to come back to this point of do all the things you know that you're supposed to be doing. And I think that this is a really good exercise. And if you have a pen and paper, or maybe you have an iPad with a notation thing, or the notes app on your phone, whatever, pause the video and make a list. If you're aware of these things, and I think this is really worth doing as an actual exercise, is write out all the things that you know that you're supposed to be doing that you're not doing. And then write out a list of all the things that you know that you shouldn't be doing that you are doing. And in that list, there will be so many things that will be directly causing you issues and side effects in your treatment or reducing your quality of life. And if you know what these things are, simply work through fixing that balance in the list of the most simple, lowest barrier to entry, meaning just the easiest things to look at first, and start to bring this into balance. Do not pay someone a bunch of money to consult you, to tell you to fix the things that you already know that you need to fix. Do that first. And then, if there are still residual issues, then seek out comprehensive blood work and a resolution from someone who knows what they're doing. But if you don't know what you're supposed to be doing, these are the big ones that I have found are significant. So number one, eat good food. Eat good food. Eat good food. Ideally, food that you cook yourself. So one of the things that I've spoken about as I think one of the most underrated biohacks of all time, because every biohack I see online is either comes in a pill bottle, comes as a powder, or comes as some kind of gadget or gizmo. And a lot of these things are great. But if the foundation's off, they are like a cherry on top of a cake that doesn't exist. So the foundational aspect of your health is your nutrition. It is the fuel that you are putting in your body. And as I said before, you might be hitting your calories fantastically. You might be getting in a great amount of protein. But if your diet is devoid of bioavailable micronutrition, and you're eating a bunch of inflammatory garbage that's causing digestive distress, you need to swap the nutrition out for good quality food. And I think the ultimate biohack is learning to cook at least one meal, or ideally a day of food, preferably that you can prepare in advance, if you're not working from home, that you look forward to eating more than whatever you can order off Uber Eats. Now, some people say to me, oh, I can't cook. I'm like, well, I can't ice skate. I can't sail a boat. I can't wakeboard. I've never learnt those skills, so I don't have them. No one is born with the inherent skill set of being able to cook. Now, some people get better at cooking than others, for sure. There's definitely, some people who are more inclined to it or enjoy it more. But you will hate cooking if what you cook tastes like shit. 100%. But you will never be able to cook things well unless you have the skill of cooking food. So my favorite meal that I cook very, very well is my version of Stan Efferding's Monster Mash, which is beef and rice. I would eat that every meal, and I would be very happy to. I remember when there was a point when I first was doing rehab for my brain injury, and all I could afford was very, very simple, basic groceries. And I was able to make a form of this monster mash using the chicken stock with the rice and learn how to cook the beef properly and season it, even though they were the cheapest versions I could get at the supermarket, that would make my mouth water when I was heating up the food. So if you can learn to cook food that you enjoy eating, that is good for you, that is high protein, that is not full of garbage, that you can digest well, this is the ultimate biohack. Even if you're someone who is busy and you outsource your nutrition, maybe you get a meal prep service, maybe you're doing phenomenally well with your finances and you have a personal chef, maybe you married someone who cooks your meals for you, but you still should have that foundational skill. You either need to cook nutritious food for the majority of your meals at home, or you need to solicit a company to provide high quality pre-prepared meals, or you need to hire a chef. Or, secret answer D is marry someone who cooks. But it has to be one of those things, And I think it's important to still develop the skill of being able to cook at least one meal that you look forward to. Get 8+ hours of sleep. Now, I've seen the people on YouTube who say, well, I can thrive on 5 hours of sleep, or I can thrive on 4 hours of sleep. There is something in science called the 95th percentile confidence interval. The layman's terms of this is that exceptions to rules get disproven. Sorry, that was completely wrong. Please clap that up. What this means is that exceptions do not disprove rules. This is very important. So if you have 100 people that you survey for a result, and 95 of them are in the middle, clustered around a center point, and then 5 of them are drastically off way, way, way away to the other end of the spectrum, they are still people, they still have human rights, they still exist. But for the sake of the rule, they are eliminated because they are so far away from the vast majority of people. And I'm not saying 60%, I'm saying 95%. So 95% of people do better getting 8 hours of sleep per night. Now, if you can get away with 7 and you have healthy sleep cycles and you wake up feeling rested, great. If you don't sleep well, as Tim Ferriss says, budget more time in bed to be able to get your 8 hours of sleep. I'm in bed at 8 p.m. I'm usually asleep by 9, and I'm up at 5. So go to bed at a time that allows you to get a good quality 8 hours of sleep. And one thing I would add to this that was not in the original lecture is that you should have a set bedtime 7 days a week, which will make it much easier to have a set wake up time. A lot of people set their alarm at the same time every day, but don't go to bed at the same time. It is much easier to consistently have a bedtime like what you would have when you were growing up as a child. And then it allows your body to have a predictable circadian rhythm, which makes it easier to get up when you want to get up. So go to bed 7 to 9 hours before you want to get up, and do it consistently. So the next one is exercise. You have to exercise. I'm sorry, but you do. So lift weights and do cardio and do mobility work. People will say, oh, I don't need to do cardio because I can just eat less food, and then I can basically manage my calories in so that I can still be lean and not have to do cardio. 100%. You can. If body composition is your only goal, you don't have to do cardio. You don't have to do mobility. But if you want to have a healthy heart and you don't want to have high blood pressure on TRT, you need to have good cardiovascular fitness. And if you don't work an active physical job, the way that you're going to have good cardiovascular fitness is doing cardiovascular exercise. Lifting weights is also extremely important for building muscle tissue. Now, one thing that is a common still misconception is that for people who don't want to lift weights, they're saying, oh, well, I'm not going to lift weights and do resistance training because I don't want to look like a bodybuilder. You're not going to accidentally look like Mr. Olympia from going to the gym and doing some resistance training. It's not going to happen. The amount of work it takes to build a significant amount of muscle mass, even on TRT, is not going to happen by accident. So lift some degree of weights, or another way to look at this, which is how I would actually rephrase this, is do some form of resistance training. So this can be calisthenics, this can be body weight training, but you need to do some form of anaerobic resistance training in terms of building muscle tissue, which is extremely important for insulin sensitivity, extremely important for good posture, extremely important for every aspect of being a human being. You need to do some form of cardiovascular exercise, and you need to do some form of mobility work. If you neglect one of those 3 things, you will pay for it later, if you're not paying for it already. A lot of people don't like doing cardio, and a lot of people don't like doing mobility work. A lot of people also like not getting out of breath when they go up the stairs, or being in chronic pain all the time because they are consistently shortening and putting tension on their muscles, and they're not stretching them out through a extended range of motion. And then they're sitting in a chair stressed for 8 to 10 hours a day. And as a result, over time, they end up with dysfunctional muscles in their body. So you need to do some degree of all three. And if you are only doing one or only doing two, the highest return on investment for additional time you spend exercising is in whichever one you're not doing. Cardiovascular fitness responds very well to frequency. If you do cardio once a week, it's always going to suck and you're never going to get better at it. I recommend doing cardio a little bit every day or 2 to 3 times a week and doing a little bit of mobility work every day. If you consistently skip the mobility work because you're much more focused on muscle hypertrophy than actually having a healthy, functional, athletic body, you may find that you end up paying that back with rehabilitation bills or significant pain and reduced quality of life. Prehab is much cheaper than rehab. Ask any personal trainer or physiotherapist, and they will agree. Another point, which I think is a good overarching thing to look at, is move more every day. Get more steps in. 10,000 steps is a great thing to aim for, but most people aim for that, but on average fall short. I think people should aim for a minimum of 10,000 steps a day. And I said this the other day in an Instagram story. No one ever felt worse after going for a walk and getting more steps in, especially if you can go for a walk in the sun and maybe listen to a podcast. Maybe you're listening to this lecture right now, but you can hit multiple birds with one stone, going for a walk, getting time in nature if you can, otherwise getting sun exposure, being out in the world, getting away from the screens, getting away from the thoughts in your head, and listening to some music or expanding your knowledge and learning something. It's very powerful to be moving the body and stimulating the mind at the same time. And a lot of the time you'll find that you'll come back more inspired, feeling more creative, feeling more motivated, because sitting and being stationary for prolonged periods of time is objectively unhealthy and subjectively makes people not feel as good as when they're breaking up their day with more movement. So try to do more movement and don't feel like all the movement that you do has to be intense physical activity. I see a lot of guys who go to the gym and train like a savage 3 or 4 days a week for an hour, but for the rest of their time, they're just sitting and being sedentary. So go and do more movement in low intensity aspects, such as going for a walk in the morning or going for a walk in the evening or going for a walk on your lunch break. It will make a huge difference over time to how you feel. As I said before, meditate the 10 minutes every day and never skip more than 1 day in a row. This is not something that everyone has to do, but if you're looking for things to improve these aspects of your life, these are the actionable things that will move you further towards the goals that you're hoping to achieve. And these are steps and these are processes that you can tick off and add to your daily routines that will result in you achieving what you're hoping to achieve. So learn the skill of doing the work that you don't want to do. This is a skill deficit that a lot of people have that will be misdiagnosed as anxiety, avoidant personality disorder, in some cases, inattentive ADHD. I'm not saying all ADHD cases are just a lack of skill, because that is not true. But a lot of the time, people will pathologize, meaning that they'll perceive something as a medical condition when in fact they just lack a skill that they haven't practiced. And doing the stuff that needs to be done that you don't want to do is a skill. So having a to-do list, having things that you are going to action every day, maybe you can plan them the night before and do them for the sake of doing them because they need to be done. And if you consistently keep your word to yourself and say, I really don't want to go through and answer all my emails. I really don't want to, clean the house. I really don't want to do the mobility work. If you do those things despite not wanting to do them, it means that you will keep your word to yourself, you will be proud of yourself, and you will develop self-esteem as a result. This is a very powerful thing that compounds over time. So, as I said, do the things you need to do before doing the things that you want to do. So this is a great way to compartmentalize your to-do list, is you write out all the things that you need to do, And instead of doing the easiest tasks first and then putting off the difficult ones till tomorrow and then having that repeat, do them in order of the things that you don't want to do first. Willpower is finite. So if you wake up in the morning, even though it's tempting to push that stuff off to the end of the day, it's actually really beneficial to cross those things off first. And everyone knows that you will end up just putting it off to the next day, and then off to the next day, then off to the next day. And then you can have consequences for not achieving that, or you'll just feel shitty about yourself. The next one that I think, since writing this lecture originally, has gotten a lot of, I guess, wafty, esoteric kind of press, is around purpose. And purpose is important because I have worked with a lot of people who have been dealing with a lot of things. And I can honestly say, and any other health coach or doctor or practitioner working with people in the health space, I am 100% sure that you can relate to this, is that, and again, there are examples which will not apply to this. Don't argue with me in the comments like a toddler being defiant. Understand the point of what I'm saying. The people who struggle to overcome their circumstances often do not have the most objectively difficult circumstances. I have seen people who have been debilitated by relatively small things, and I have seen people overcome insurmountable odds. And the variable that the latter group had that the former group didn't have was purpose. So, for example, if your goal is to look better in the mirror for the sake of looking better in the mirror, that may not be a strong enough driver to resist the food noise, to resist the snooze button, to resist the temptations, to resist the challenges of maintaining consistent discipline. But if your goal is to be healthier so that you can be around for longer to experience your kids growing up, maybe you had a health scare, maybe you've got a new child, this can be a much more powerful motivator because the purpose is bigger than you. So having a purpose, not just in your career, but in your overall life and meaning of your existence, is really important. And one thing, again, that I learned from Paul Chek is that if people don't have a why, if people don't have a purpose, it is less likely that they will overcome the challenges that they're facing, especially if the challenges have come as a result of the chronic application of poor diet and lifestyle practices. So purpose is very important. And if your purpose is not defined, if you don't know why you want to do what you need to do, a good place to start is working that out. So the next one is to be proud of yourself, but it's to be proud of yourself for something real, for good reason. Primary schools and high schools might give out participation medals these days, but your inner monologue, the voice inside your head, that guy doesn't. Because that guy knows exactly who you are 24/7. He knows how you act behind closed doors. He knows if you're putting on a facade, and he knows if you're living up to your potential or if you're wasting it. And if that voice keeps you awake at night and tortures you, then it may be something that you want to address is being proud of yourself. And a very good way to be proud of yourself is to apply the maximal amount of effort into the areas that you know will have the best return on investment. Because even if you are still off track, which is fine, but you're getting on track and you tried and you applied yourself and you kept your word to yourself and you did the things that you know that you needed to do that day to move you 1% closer to the person that you want to be, when you lay down at the end of the day, that voice in your head will torture you less. That voice in your head and you will have a better relationship. And if you have a good relationship with yourself and you're genuinely proud of the effort that you put in that day, you're going to have much better self-esteem. The next point that I think is worth looking at is to be courageous and brave. And being courageous and brave may look like different things to different people. And a really common example that I've seen show up, which I think doesn't get enough credit, is that if you've tried the diet thing and you've tried the exercise thing and you haven't responded because you've been low testosterone and you haven't put on the muscle that you should have put on and you haven't lost the fat that you should have, even when you were doing everything right, now that you've corrected the foundational deficit that caused all that stuff not to work properly, it takes a hell of a lot of courage and a hell of a lot of bravery to go back and say, hey, that thing that didn't work the last 9 times, the 10th time it is going to work. And I'm going to give that another shot. So you don't have to go and fight a lion or wrestle a bear or do some kind of massive endeavor of bravery that on the outside is something that we would consider societally brave, like in an action movie or something like this. Courageous and brave to you may be fixing your maladaptive habits. It may be quitting alcohol. It may be getting comfortable with being sober. It may be dropping the vices that you know are going to be challenging to drop, but you're going to lean into that discomfort and face the world for what it is. And I think that that doesn't get enough credit, and that if you are leaning into those things and fighting your own battles, you should give yourself the credit where credit is due for moving towards where you want to be, rather than criticizing yourself for how far you still have to go. So people ask me, like, what's my purpose? So I'm just going to put my purpose in here so that people can maybe have an example. Is my goal is to make the world a better place because I was in it, and to leave the world a better place than when I found it. And that's why I'm making this lecture at 8 p.m. on a Friday, 8:20 p.m. on a Friday. That's why I'm doing a lot of what I do. And that way, at the end of the day, when I'm tired, when I'm worn out, when I've applied a huge amount of effort, I know that through the work I've done and through the interactions I've had, that I have created a net positive experience on the world for the people who I've worked with and the people close to me. And that is my purpose. So the other side to this equation that I spoke about before is stop doing all the things you know you shouldn't be doing. And if you don't know what those are, these are the big ones that I see come up a lot. So first one, remove the drugs and the alcohol. So alcohol is not healthy. I know that there are a lot of studies saying that low amounts of alcohol can have health promoting benefits. This is bullshit. This has been debunked extensively. If you are in denial about this, that is fine. That is your poor decision, but I am telling you that alcohol is a carcinogen. The primary metabolite of alcohol, acetaldehyde, is toxic to every cell in the body, and the only healthy amount of alcohol consumption is 0. People may not have understood this from former science, but massive meta-analysis of alcohol consumption, as well as mechanistic theory, makes it very, very clear that there is no healthy amount of alcohol. And if you have trouble with drinking low amounts of alcohol, I have seen a number of people get away with 1 to 2 standard drinks per week. If you are having side effects on TRT, anything beyond that is causing you problems. And if you remove that alcohol, if you're having issues with your gut, issues with acne, issues with sleep, issues with motivation, issues with energy levels, issues with water retention, issues with estrogenic issues, all of these side effects, cut the alcohol first. The other thing is to remove recreational drugs. If you are using recreational drugs, what you need to understand as an umbrella approach is that you are synthetically creating an environment where the surroundings and the circumstances that you're living in are being altered to feel better than they should be. And depending on the drug that you're using, this can be more or less harmful for your biology, but this is time that you should be spending putting the work into whatever work needs to be done in order for those situations and for those aspects of your life to not need to be chemically altered in order to not be uncomfortable. The opportunity cost of drug use, whether it's the come down or the resulting effects after the drug wears off, or the lack of time and energy spent on fixing whatever needs to be fixed and looking through a sober lens at what is going on that makes you feel like you need to have an aspect of escapism, is something that is detrimental over time. Now, reduce or limit, and I think it should be limited as much as possible, the amount of low nutrient, high calorie foods. This is also known as junk food. Reconsider the use of prescription medications, especially psychiatric medications. If someone has a severe psychiatric condition, this point does not apply to you. But if you are using psychiatric drugs for low-grade mood issues, a lot of the time when it's anxiety or depression that is circumstantial, it is worth reconsidering whether this is the correct approach. Stop shifting the blame for your behavior. Someone may say something or do something or act in a certain way that makes you feel a certain way, but you ultimately are responsible for how you choose to respond to that. And if you act impulsively, if you immediately embody your emotions, then this is a lack of mindfulness. There needs to be a space between the stimulus and the response, because people absolutely say and do horrible shit. I have experienced plenty of this in my life, but I am ultimately responsible for how I respond to that. So you must give yourself and take accountability for how you show up in response to the stimulus. You cannot blame other people for how you respond to what they say or what they do. That is 100% on you. Stop putting off tomorrow what you could do. Stop putting off to tomorrow what you could do today. So if you have things that need to be done and you keep putting them off to the next day, the problem is that things will come up the next day that also need to be done. This creates the feeling of being behind the 8 ball constantly, which creates low-grade chronic stress, which one is not healthy for the body, but it also creates unnecessary additional anxiety, stress in your life that makes, one, the enjoyment of life much lower, but two, it reduces the benefits of the trajectory of where you could end up had you gotten on top of these things. The next one is stop being irresponsible of your self-image. Dress well. Maintain good personal hygiene. Be proud of your appearance. If you look in the mirror and strip down naked and hate what you see in front of you, that is something that you need to work on. Stop being irresponsible with your finances. So I see a lot of people who are partying like they're rich and sleeping in like they're rich when they are living paycheck to paycheck. Another thing that I think is very important when it comes to finances, though, and I think it's more important than how much money you're making, especially with the economy the way that it is managing your finances. If you are not managing your finances properly, you may increase your income, but because you're not aware of your spending, you may still feel anxiety or stress when you check your bank balance or when you go to pay a bill, wondering if your card is going to decline. I strongly recommend reading or at least looking at the pictures in the book of The Barefoot Investor. I think if you can create a framework where you have automated transfers into different accounts, and he explains how to set this up very well in the book, so that you have your direct debits all taken care of, you have your bills and expenses all taken care of, you can save a percentage of what you make, even if that number is small, it's still a percentage, and then you have the money in your account that you are not stressed about because you know that you're not going to get to the end of the week or the fortnight or the month coming up short on your bills. So managing your finances is extremely important regardless of how much money you are making. Stop being disorganized and unprofessional. So what I mean by unprofessional is take pride in every aspect of what you do, especially related to whatever you are doing for your career. How you do one thing is how you do everything. When I was in university, one of the jobs that I had was managing the bookings for an all-ages music venue at a skate park in Perth. And we would get bands all the time send us emails to say, hey, I want to play my first show, and here's a copy of my demo and this and that. And these were bands who were in high school who'd recorded a demo on some kind of old Windows PC computer. They all sounded garbage. All of these bands were terrible because they were kids that never played a show. But I didn't assess whether they would get the gig based on how good their music was. I assessed whether they would get the performance based on, did they spell check their email? Did they format the email properly? How did they actually present their pitch? Because what I learned was that the bands who didn't communicate professionally didn't rock up on time. They didn't do the changeover of their instruments efficiently. They make the whole thing run like a mess. They'd show up drunk. They'd be drinking beers in the parking lot. How you do one thing is a very accurate assessment of how you do everything. And even if it's not, you will be judged on that, because people do judge books by their cover. So don't be disorganized. If you're disorganized, you're going to add stress to your life that could be avoided by proper preparation. And always present yourself in a professional manner in whatever you do. You will get a lot further in whatever aspect of life you are hoping to further yourself in and achieve. And the last point that I think is fundamentally important is stop spending time with people who discourage, distract, or lead you astray. There are people in your life that you may have around you that do not want the best for you. There are people in your life who maybe were fun and had some really good times, and all of those things are true. And it doesn't mean that they're bad people just for that. But if you have people in your life who are critical of you focusing on self-improvement, if they are wanting to drag you down with them or keep you at their level, because if you start to work on the things that they know they need to work on, they're either going to come and join you in that, or they're going to criticize you, because now you are reflecting back to them the parts of themselves that they don't like. And one thing that is undeniably true, it is a cliche for a reason. It gets parroted and repeated all the time because people know it's true, is that you are the product of the people that you spend the most time with. And this also extends, and I will reinforce this for 2025 because it's more true than it was when this was originally recorded. This also extends to the people that you follow on social media. So if people that you are following on social media are a bad influence, if they encourage you or make you feel predisposed to doing stuff in your life that is not going to lead you towards being the person that you want to be or achieving the goals that you want to achieve, remove these people from your social media feed. Be around people who support you, be around people who encourage you, be around people who want the best for you. And the way that you attract those people into your life is that you level up yourself, and then you will basically become desirable to be in networks of other people who are engaging in the same behaviors. So the last point that I think is very important, and I originally sent this to my Nana, and she passed away last year, but she was very proud of this. I remember the smile on her face when I sent her this, and I repeated this at the Silverback Summit, is if you are wondering what other things are worth looking at, is do all the stuff your grandma told you to do. And if maybe you grew up without a grandma, or she wasn't around for you, the stuff that she taught me when I was younger, when I was into eating chicken nuggets and playing Nintendo 64 instead of being a healthy athletic kid, is spend more time outside. Take time to smell the flowers, have some fun, eat more home-cooked food, don't stay up too late, stop playing video games, do the right thing, call your mom on the weekend if she's still around. All of these things have wisdom because they are important. Self-improvement, working on these things, being disciplined, all of that stuff is integral. But if you're constantly working and you never take time to enjoy the fruits of your labor, if you never have time to be present with your spouse over dinner or a coffee, you never have time to enjoy and make the memories of life passing you by, you may look back and wish you had done that differently. So I've got a few key points that I want to close off on today. And these are kind of points that I think are worth reflecting on, or points that I think are worth, taking some time to at least hear again, or maybe hear for the first time. Do you want high serum testosterone levels, or do you want to be the man who was built on high testosterone levels? So this is repeated from the first lecture, but I'm repeating these key points. Is testosterone does not make you into a masculine man by default. It facilitates you becoming that man, but it's not going to do that work for you. So many young men are doing everything right to produce the optimal testosterone levels, but they remain hypogonadal even in their teen years and early 20s. This means that in his prime time of his life, he is not driven to or physiologically able to overcome, persevere, and to achieve his goals. And as a result, he may not even have goals in the first place because he's so busy focusing on just surviving and getting by. Repairing the foundation does not rebuild the house. It gives you the opportunity to do so, but it doesn't do that for you. So just like buying a sports car is not going to make you a better driver, it's going to give you the potential and the tools needed to become a better driver, but it's not going to actually do that for you. So if you want to inject the optimal amount of testosterone that you could potentially make, and this is a key point of literally every single talk I give, you must exist in a way that your body would be maximizing its natural testosterone production if it could. Because if you don't do that, you are inherently working against your body rather than working with it. And the body will push back. And this is what produces side effects. Many guys are too complacent. Many guys are too impatient. So when I've talked about all these things today, these are all things that if you adopt and fix and change and embody and build into your life in various ways and shapes and forms or whatever, it's going to help you straight away. But the real result comes from applying these things consistently over time. And I know I sound like a broken record, but this is the stuff that comes up multiple times a day, working in the trenches on helping men actually achieve what they hoped to achieve when they set out on their testosterone replacement therapy journey. It takes time, and it takes a lot of time. Especially when you're doing uncomfortable things, it feels like it's a lot of work because it is. And there's nothing wrong with that because the value in the work isn't just the outcome, it's the value of doing the work itself. And it takes time and work together to undo the years of psychological and physiological damage and maladaptive processes that you develop from hypogonadism. So being that 1% better every day, if you took notes from this lecture or you remembered key points, working on those things gradually over time is a really good way to build inertia, building momentum, because feeling like you're making progress is a really good antidote psychologically for anxiety and depression. So this is a point that I said at the end of the first lecture. And I'm going to say it again, because this is something that I come back to a lot personally that inspires me. And I know for a fact that it inspired a lot of people because when I originally wrote it, it was probably the most viral thing that I've ever written. And the extended post is at the back of TRT 102. But this is the summary, and this is the key point, is that you are listening to this, and I am speaking this, because you and I, and everyone who's alive today, is the dominant bloodline of the human race. So of everyone who came before us, who died off from war and famine and scarcity of food and didn't survive weather conditions and all of these different things that happened over the course of human time, it is this bloodline and everyone who came before you who reproduced and got to the point that you are here today. So you are the descendants of those who overcame every single adversity, like literally every single adversity since the dawn of mankind. That's really important. That is objective fact. And that is a very powerful thing to understand because whether you realize it or not, you are the peak of human evolution. So as the modern expression of Mother Nature's apex predator, the dominant bloodline, the peak of human evolution, and the top of the food chain, the most advanced species in the world, you have so much fucking potential, and you should live up to that potential. that is all I have for you today. So I hope you found that useful. I hope you found that valuable. And I will see you all on the rest of the lecture series. Have a good day. You have to understand is that testosterone does not by default make you a masculine man. It facilitates you becoming that man, but it will not do that work for you. How does testosterone impact how you feel, and how are those mechanisms occurring in the brain?